Hey everyone, this is Helena, and I'm so excited to be talking with the amazingly brilliant coach, Jack Butler, today. He is so smart, and I've been secretly wanting to get him on my channel for a long time now. So I'm so excited to actually getting to have you on and like share you with my audience. He's just like a wealth of knowledge. So I'm super excited. I'm just turning the volume down on this so I can see the chat. And
thanks for having me.
Okay, yes, yeah, we're gonna turn the volume down. So we're super excited. Today we're gonna be talking about the surprising thing that men secretly crave and exactly how to use this in dating and relationships when you're with a man, exactly what to do and say to really inspire him to show up powerfully for you in the relationship. So Jack is a life and relationship coach who helps people connect with their authentic selves so they can be loved for who they truly are in a relationship. And I hope I said that correctly, Jack.
Did I? Great.
Okay. Okay.
Hold on.
Awesome. So welcome and thank you so much for being here today. I'm super excited.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to hearing what people want, hearing your questions, and kind of getting stuck in.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just checking to make sure everything's working, and I think it is. If anything happens with the sound or the video, just let us know in the chat. And oh, there's already a lot of people watching, and we'll get to all your questions. So if you have any questions about this topic for myself and Jack, let us know in the chat, and we would love to answer them. So, all right, let's just jump right in today, Jack. What is that one thing that men secretly crave that's kind of counterintuitive, but it's just so important, right? To really connect and build intimacy in the relationship.
Yeah, that one thing, as I see it from all the coaching I've done with hundreds of clients across the world, is your vulnerability. You know, what we could call the power of vulnerability, or the power of your feminine vulnerability. And oftentimes, I think there's a common mistake that people think vulnerability is a weakness. And I really want to make a pitch today to say vulnerability can be the biggest strength and asset that you bring to a relationship. When you're actually vulnerable and reveal what's going on for you and invite a guy into your emotional world and let him actually be a support to you in the places that you feel frail or uncertain, that it's actually one of the biggest turn-ons to guys. And it really encourages them to show up as a dude, as a guy, in their strength, in their protector. And ultimately, that's a lot of what women want a man to show up as, you know? So
it's true. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I have to say, I've been getting so many questions and requests for videos. I talk a lot about vulnerability and authenticity here on my channel, and I've been getting so many questions lately about that. Like, how exactly do you do that? Because it can be really hard, right? Like, I feel that a lot of times. I'm like, I don't want to be vulnerable right now. I just want to shut down, right? And just feel safe. But you know, I truly believe that being vulnerable and authentic is actually not only the most powerful place you can come from, but it's actually like the way you can protect yourself most seriously. Because when you're vulnerable, when you're like connected to your heart and your feminine energy, like your intuition kicks in, right? Like that part really comes online, and you can really feel like, is this a good situation? Or, you know, does this not feel good? Do I need to take a step back? But when you're, you know, when you're open and you're connected to yourself, you can really feel that. When you're cut off from that because you think you're trying to protect yourself, you're actually cut off from your intuition. That's what I've found. I mean, that's been my experience. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Jack.
Yeah. Well, so even to take the little mini example that you kind of gave there, where you're like, I don't want to be vulnerable, I want to shut down. So the way that you might approach that in vulnerability is actually just to reveal that, right? To reveal that right now, I really want to shut down. Like right now, I'm kind of scared and I don't even want to talk to you, and I kind of feel like I want to bolt and leave the room. And you might be surprised that when you actually drop and reveal your deeper experience, it's kind of easier for someone to get you and actually meet you and know you and know what's going on for you. You know, so it's like there are these little moments, you know, ongoingly in relationships where you can either kind of close and not reveal what's going on, or you can take a little risk, reveal what's going on, and you might find that there's actually more connection and intimacy that comes from that place. So it doesn't mean it has to feel easy. It might feel really, really scary, or really, really like you're pushing yourself off a cliff. That's kind of okay. That's the point of it. That's why it is vulnerability, you know? And then you get to also use it as a filter with guys that you're dating, or if you're in a relationship with a guy. Like ultimately, if he can't really be with the truth of who you are, he's not your guy. So there's as hard as it might be to reveal yourself, it's like if you don't reveal yourself, you'll never attract the right guy because he's not actually seeing you. So this is kind of a pitch for when you're really you, the right person can actually come and partner with you.
Oh my gosh, do you guys see why I think Jack is so amazing? It's so great, right? And also, and this just came up for me right now as you were speaking, it's also like kind of like the #1 way to qualify a guy, because you want to see
absolutely.
what he does, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to see what he does when you're your real self, right? I think that's amazing. Do you mind if I say hi to everyone in the chat real quick? I haven't looked at it. Lots of people watching live. Okay, Patricia, Roxanne, Adrian. Oh, we got major YouTube celebrity watching us. Awesome. Karen, Nicole. Nicole asked, how do you know so much? What is the right way to be open and vulnerable? We're going to totally go over that. Hi to Gloria, Melanie. I've been watching your videos for a while. First time I've seen you live. Oh, I'm so happy to have you here. Amazing. I've seen all your videos. Okay, well, we're so excited. If you guys have questions about this, definitely let us know. We will try and get to all of them. We have about an hour, right? So why is it, let me start from the beginning, because I just got excited and like got ahead of myself already. Why is it so difficult for us to be vulnerable sometimes? I mean, like I said, I feel that a lot of times, and I feel like I'm pretty good at it, and it feels good to me to be vulnerable. I really like it. And I found once you kind of try it and start to see the amazing results that you'll get with it right away, it'll start to be like second nature. But there's still times where I'm like, I just don't want to open up right now. Why is it so hard for us to like do that?
Yeah, there's a few things I want to say about that. So the first one is that oftentimes there are bad experiences that you have in the past, right? Where you've actually tried to do this and it hasn't gone well. Maybe it's been shamed. Maybe it's been shut down. Maybe you revealed something and then, we call it like the vulnerability hangover, where you kind of perhaps disclosed more than you actually had a relational container to hold it. So there is like I kind of like to call it like an upward cycle of vulnerability. Like the more you get to know someone, the more you get into deeper container and trust with them, the easier it is to actually have a container to hold intimacy. Most people don't want to be intimate with, particularly women, don't want to be intimate without some level of container or commitment. So part of this is also about being intuitively discerning about who is the guy in front of you, right? And trying to do this with a guy that has your trust. That's step number one. The second thing is, I think, there's a time and a place for this. So partly you have to be able to read, like, where are we in our connection right now? Where am I and where is he? Because, guys, when they're in their more doing brain, are not that great at being with your vulnerability, because they're in their problem-solving brain.
Oh, that's such a good point. Wow. Oh my gosh. I didn't think about that. Yeah, it's such a good point.
Right. So you kind of go to be vulnerable and he's trying to solve your vulnerability. And actually what you want is for him to be with your vulnerability. So, part of that is actually, noticing where he's at or framing with him. And I'm really a big fan of framing. Like if you actually want him to listen to you and be with your experience rather than solve your problem, you might just have to frame that with him and just say, hey, there's some things I want to share with you. It's a little vulnerable for me. I just need 5 minutes for you to hear me, and you don't have to solve anything. And, it might take a practice. The guys are a bit like dogs. You have to train them. But once you've trained a guy, like he can get that, then you're not at a mismatch where you're trying to drop into your vulnerability and he's like, oh, that sounds like an easy problem. I can solve that for you. So that's one of the biggest issues I see, and I do it myself as a guy. I totally do it. But I've also, I notice when I do it, and I notice more than ever that if I'm having that impact, I'm like, oh, I'm trying to solve your problem and you actually don't want that right now. So framing is really important in this. The other thing that's really important in this is presence, right? Because it's only when we're present to ourselves that we actually really know what's going on with us. So part of vulnerability is, if you're going to reveal something that's true for you, you actually need to know what's true for you. And the best way of knowing what's true for you is at some level of being present or mindful, or kind of being, as we call it, more on your side of the fence, right? Oftentimes in common culture at large, we tend to be over there with other people. And you've got to learn how to bring more attention back into your own energy field, your space, your experience, to even know what your experience is. So if you find that vulnerability is hard, I would say practice this. Practice being with someone, but having 80% of your attention on yourself. Practice what's that like. Notice what's hard about that. Because I see this with my coaching clients where I'm like, oh, so what's your experience? And they'll tell me everything about the guy, and they won't know what their own experience is. Now, what did you feel? What came up for you? Not what his problems are, not what he's thinking or wanting, what came up for you. So there's something about the power of self that relates to being vulnerable.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's so true. Like I talk about this like as it relates to taking your focus off of a man and what he's thinking and what's going on with him, right? And focusing on yourself. And that's the way to do. Another thing I always say is a way to connect with a man's heart truly is always through your own heart first, right?
Yes.
It's just the only way. So if you're up in your head trying to create some connection or stir something into creation, like I'm going to be vulnerable to get him to open up more and develop more intimacy, like I said, you're cut off from yourself and your own heart, right?
I agree with that totally.
Yeah.
It's best if you start at home. Then you're making an invitation rather than making a demand.
It's like another way. I love what you said, 80% what's going on with you. I've never heard that before. That's why I love, oh my gosh, everyone go subscribe to Jack's channel after this is over, by the way. I included the link. I was watching some of your videos.
Links for the video. Awesome. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, they're really good. They're really helpful for me personally. So yeah, amazing. I just love everything you have to say. Oh my gosh. So yeah, 80% what's going on with you, right?
Yeah, and I'm saying that because generally speaking, the attention is more over there with someone else, right? If you're actually someone that's very, very self-oriented, that may not be the practice for you. But in gross generalization, for most of the women that I've worked with, particularly when they start to get excited about being in connection with a guy, they're kind of over there with him and learning how to stand in your own power, really, is another part of it. If you ever feel... I know you've got the link here to our the webinar that I have with Clayton Olson, right? So we talk about the discarded archetype, the discarded meaning that you tend to feel like the power in relationships is over there with men and not over here with you. If that's ever true for you, I really would encourage you to practice what I'm talking about, because you come more into your power the more you can keep attention on yourself. Otherwise, you tend to kind of lose yourself, you know? So being vulnerable is actually one of the best counterweights to losing yourself in relationship, right? If you're really actually vulnerable and over here with your own experience, chances are you're not merging and getting lost in the guy. And for most people, that will give them a more powerful relationship.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm just like thinking about this, a lot of things that I talk about, like you're getting me to think about them in a whole new way, right? Like, because another thing I kind of teach in a lot of my videos is like, you know, we can get so wrapped up in how we feel about a man and like his qualities, right? That we're kind of ignoring like how we're feeling about ourselves.
Totally.
Often not very good, right? Especially if he's like not doing what he's supposed to be doing, and we can ignore like, you know, we can tolerate unacceptable behavior because we are all caught up in our feelings for him. It's another way we take our focus, we disconnect from ourselves and we focus on him, right? So yeah, I love everything you're saying. It's just like, oh my God, I'm starting to think about things in a whole new way though. Amazing. Yeah, I'm just checking the chat, by the way, every time I'm looking at my phone, I'm just checking. Great questions, everyone. It's so very hard to be vulnerable. What can help me open up more? Someone else asks, oh, you guys are so sweet. Oh my gosh. I don't know how to be vulnerable. Someone else said, help me open up more. Do you have any more? Because everything you're saying, I'm just loving right now. Do you have any more like tips on how to do this? Because yeah, it can be difficult, especially if you're not used to it, right?
Yes. Okay. So one other avenue into this is to start to pay more attention to the we space, right? Which can sound like a fancy phrase, but basically what is the quality of space like between you and the other person? Because the more you can tune into that, the more you can notice if there are more openings to being vulnerable, and the more you're actually talking about what is happening in real time, right? So that I'm trying to make this connection that there's something to do with vulnerability and being in the moment or being present to what's really going on. And if you're not present to what's going on, it's kind of hard to be vulnerable. Otherwise, you're talking about, you know, Donald Trump or politics or your work or something that happened last week. But there's a kind of vulnerability that really gets entered into when you slow it down, you breathe a little more, and you start to notice like, like what's it kind of like to be me right now? And you start to talk a little bit from that place. Like, oh, I notice I feel really shy right now, you know, or I notice I don't even know what to say to you, but I'm liking connecting with you. That's a kind of edge of vulnerability, because it's kind of like, oh, that's really what's going on for you. Most of the time we kind of go blah, 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 but we miss that there's this like deeper level of what's actually happening for us, you know? So it's tricky. It takes practice, and it takes also practicing with people that want to practice with you. So again, to your point about a qualifier, if you notice that a guy doesn't really have presence with you, that when you're with him, his mind is completely elsewhere, his attention's elsewhere, that's a good qualifier, because you might want to have a guy, even if he's a super busy guy who's crushing it in his life and career, whatever he's up to, when he's with you, you want to know, can he actually drop in and be with you, even for 30 minutes? Like most women are not used to having that quality of attention and presence on them. And if you get used to it, you'll probably start to like it. So there's something about vulnerability that has with just slowing it down a little bit. The other thing you can do is journal. Right? Journaling is a way of it's like a conversation with yourself. And if you don't like writing journaling, just use voice memo on your iPhone or your smartphone. Just start talking to yourself. Start getting to know yourself better, because then there's more to be vulnerable about, right? It's like there's more of, I'm actually here at home and I want to talk to you about what's actually going on for me.
Wow. And men love that, don't they? I know it's a common misconception that men like hate emotions. They think, they hate drama. Obviously, men don't like drama, but men love it. They love your vulnerability, don't they? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes.
I say it all the time, but probably coming from a guy,
totally. I'd say even the little things like, hey, we're going hiking and there's a ledge that you don't want to step down on your own. Just inviting a guy to say, hey, would you hold my hand? Or letting a guy see if you're actually really afraid, that it's okay to be afraid, like acknowledging that you feel a bit afraid. If you are in a relationship and you're, coming back late at night, and you would feel safer if he came and picked you up, that can be a great way of, as a guy, that's like, yeah, I'm going to step up and I don't want you being afraid. I want to protect you. That's kind of what it cultivates in someone. If you feel teary, not being afraid to shed a tear, not trying to shed a tear, but if you actually feel really sad about something, that a lot of guys get really turned on when women cry and emote in that way, because it's like, yeah, cool, I want to hold you, I want to protect you, I want to be a man for you, right? There is a kind of way that men are a little, generally speaking, less susceptible to that kind of emotional experience. So it's easier for them sometimes just to stand up and be with you in that. The other piece I want to say is, men don't like drama, right? No shit. So the distinction is distinguishing emotional reactivity from emotional vulnerability, right? So emotional reactivity is blame, upset, hysteria, making demands, right? It's basically saying there's something wrong and you, my man, are the problem. That's kind of what emotional reactivity is. You should have done this, or you should have known, or you should have said, versus the vulnerability, which is like, wow, it just feels really, I feel really bad inside that I didn't hear from you today. That's a different thing than saying you should have texted me today, right? Again, that's like owning your experience. And generally, you might be surprised that if you really own your experience without blame and judgment, but just from observation, it's so much easier for men to give you what you want. Right? Because then things that historically were demands, like do this for me covertly, or shaming him for not doing it, suddenly that's like a request, like, hey, it would feel really great for me if you could just text me on your lunch hour and just check in. That would be great. And, a lot of guys can say yes to those little things because they're no longer being made wrong or feeling like they're covertly being manipulated into doing them.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I have so much to say on all that. If you guys have specific situations, like let us know in the chat. There's already like so many great questions. I can't wait to get to them. But if you have specific situations, we can like give you scripts, or I like to do that. I'm sure I would love to hear what you have to say about that, Jack. So
yes.
Like how to deal with that situation in a vulnerable way rather than in a dramatic way, or like you said, making him wrong, which is just going to kind of like activate his defenses, right?
That's what happens.
Shut down and back off even more, right?
It's generally what happens.
I love what you've been saying. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. I've been talking about this a little bit on my channel over the last couple of weeks. Like I've been pretty like depressed lately because of some like physical things, emotional, and just kind of have like low level, mild depression that got like bumped up to moderate or something. I think I'm coming out of it, but it's funny because I don't have the energy to cover myself up the way I might.
I like that. I mean, that might feel difficult, but that's where it starts to get real, right? Like if you're used to, this is sometimes where people come into their own vulnerabilities. If you're used to sort of knowing yourself as like a, ambitious, go-getter, high energy, make it happen person, sometimes life will arrange for something that you can't control in order to open you to your deeper vulnerability. And it can feel really difficult, but it's sort of like an opening, like, oh, actually, maybe I can tell the truth a little more. Maybe I can rely on people, or maybe it's okay to say, you know what, tonight I feel like toast and I want someone to come cook me dinner or help me or rub my feet or whatever it is. You know, that we're actually deeply social animals. We need each other. No one's got it all together. I know this from coaching, that the more people look like they have it together, generally the less they do, because they've got very good at running a performative script, like go, 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 do. But in terms of deeper, like what's real, what's your heart, what do you care about, where's your tenderness? There's normally way loads going on there for anyone.
Oh my gosh.
You know?
I don't have it anywhere near together. I mean, especially right now, I'm not feeling good within myself, like kind of right now. I'm feeling better, but so I'm like going out in the world, like wanting to hide even more, but I don't have the energy to cover that up, right? And so it's kind of crazy because I do feel more magnetic on a certain level. Like, I even had someone tell me the other day it was so funny because it was Tuesday, right after, like a few hours after we talked and we're planning this thing on feminine vulnerability. I just couldn't get out from under this like bad feeling I was having. And it's so not like me, but I was down at the beach and I was kind of like staring out in the ocean and I'm like in tears a little bit, like I had tears in my eyes. And the person I was with was like, you're so magnetic when you're vulnerable. It kind of blew my mind.
I love that reflection.
Just been talking about that. He's like, so embarrassing to like say, but he's like, I think it's just like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my whole life. Yeah. So which is so crazy because we were just talking about it. So it really is true. And like logically, I know that, but to really be experiencing it out in the world right now is like, it's so true. It's in a way you kind of become more magnetic to your desires because like, if you guys ever notice that men like love you when you're sick or like when you're sleeping and tired, because you just don't have the energy to overfunction and try and put on this perfect like exterior, right?
Persona,
Totally. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love everything you're saying. Okay. I'm like so caught up in what you're saying that I haven't even been looking at this. So let me check in real quick with the chat. My current partner had an unstable and insecure ex, so I'm finding it hard to express my more negative emotions and vulnerability. Ooh, do you have any tips for someone who like maybe had a previous partner that, like you said, maybe was really dramatic and unstable, and so I can relate to that a little bit. So then when you were vulnerable, they like might take it as manipulation or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I definitely reiterate the piece about distinguishing reactivity, right? So just really getting clear in yourself. Are you expressing emotion without any attachment to what it brings up for the other person, right? There's a way that when you're purely in your expression, it's kind of like you're not needing something from the other person. I would also try and set up specific spaces, like sacred spaces, where you can connect on this sort of stuff, where you both show up and know that, we're going to kind of have some intimacy time and we're going to talk and we're going to drop in a little bit deeper, because if both people are in the same space, it kind of makes it a lot easier. Like if you're both showing up with an intention, like, hey, we kind of want to connect here. The other piece of this is to realize that you're not responsible for your partner's experience. And when you really get that, so like you might be vulnerable and it could trigger him. Like, let's say that's the worst thing that could happen. It could trigger him, even though you wouldn't want that to happen. Maybe there's something about realizing that other people get to have their response to you. So it's not like if you are vulnerable and then someone gets into a difficult spot, that's sort of like their vulnerability, right? So I'm all of that to say, just make sure there's not any sort of codependence in there where you start to be a little bit over responsible for your guy's behavior, or if your guy shuts down to you, that's his work, right? I mean, as a coach who mostly coaches women but also works with men, it's like that's what I do when I work with men, is like helping them learn when their own defenses are coming up. And so if a guy never wants to look at that stuff, never wants to look at his defenses, never wants to look at the ways that he might be keeping you at arm's distance, again, that might be a sort of qualifier where you're like, wow, that might not work great for me, or I might need to have a real conversation about that with him at a good time when we can both show up resourced and kind of say like, oh, I feel a bit vulnerable. I feel like you are responding to me as if I'm your ex, and that's difficult for me. But do it from the vulnerability side, where you're like, I feel small, or I feel worried, or I feel like you might leave me, or whatever's true for you, rather than I'm going to make you wrong because I think you're looking at me and seeing your ex, and I'm not that person, and I'm going to get adamant that I'm not that person, right? So notice if you can militate against your own defenses when you're coming up with your vulnerability. Because I think for most of us, if we're vulnerable and someone doesn't meet us there, it's so sensitive that the defense comes right up and we make them wrong. And so much of this is about not making the other person wrong. Asking for what you want, but not making the other person wrong. Making requests, but not making demands.
Oh my gosh, that was so good. It was kind of like what you said before, like keeping it all about yourself and your own experience, not like it's being vulnerable is not saying, I think you're shutting down because of your situation with your ex, right? You're just like, I'm experiencing this. I'm feeling a little insecure because.
Right, I'm feeling insecure. That might be a way to go in, and that might help lower his defenses, you know? And that, you know, I'm also here to say that this is sensitive territory. You know, it's not like it always goes, you know, the best, and it's really important territory. Like if you're not being vulnerable with your partner, there's a way that it limits the intimacy. And most of us really, when it comes down to it, even more than sex, we really want intimacy. We actually really want to be connected to another person.
Yeah, I was just, one thing I might want to add for that situation is a lot of people take this to mean like talking about the relationship constantly and like getting in there and all this like important stuff, but you can be vulnerable like right from the very first time you meet a guy. So with this situation with your partner, you might want to try this with things that have nothing to do with the relationship at first. Talk about how you feel about the weather or something. So he kind of gets used to that a little bit, to where it's not like every time you're vulnerable, it's talking about the relationship and these deep issues. I don't know.
That's a great bit of advice. Yeah, and the other sort of nuance on that is there's a vulnerability that can also come with positive emotion, right? Like,
oh my gosh,
you know, if you get a raise at work and you're really excited, you know, or like you hear that your aunt's coming to visit and you just can't wait to see her, that might be the first place to practice with someone. And if they can hold that, then it might be a little easier to see like, oh, let me go to some of the places that are, you know, deeper or maybe darker. Also, your own relationship with those places makes a huge difference. So if I can love and accept myself in my deeper, darker, quote, negative emotions, it's a lot easier for someone else to be with them. Oftentimes what we do is we project onto the other person the places that we're judging ourselves. And then our own inner critic has a field day and says, oh, they don't love me, they don't like me. But it's actually some of that's on your own side of the fence, that you don't like you when you're being, quote, negative. And if you can start to see that, you know, negative and positive emotion, you can sort of break that script and just say emotion is emotion at one level, whether it's joy, depression, happiness, sadness, resignation, frustration. They're all emotions. And if you just experience them and don't overlay a story, then it's much easier to be with them. Whereas if I have a story that, oh, every time I'm sad, you think this of me, or I'm not allowed to be, it's just harder to let it rise. So what I mean? So I'm sort of distinguishing authentic emotion actually doesn't have a story attached to it. It just is, right? You are just sad. You might know what triggered it, but you don't need to get too stuck in that. You can go more directly to, wow, I'm really sad right now. Could you just hold me for a minute? Now that's going to be a lot easier for most men to be with. Just, can you hold me for a minute? Than a huge process around excavating everything that happened in your childhood. And, you know, so basically what I'm saying, a lot of people, when they feel sad or difficult emotions, they actually lose presence and they slip into a story about who they were when they were a little child, or who hurt them in the past. So that's not actually vulnerability. That's actually being in the past. So vulnerability is actually keeping it in the present, in the here and now with the other person, and kind of keeping it a little simpler, honestly. You know, like there's sadness here right now.
So good. Yeah. And I'm like kind of laughing over here because just how true that is, how we project our own insecurities out. It's almost like
we all do it.
Yeah. We're like rejecting ourselves, and then we're like making up a story like they're rejecting me or they don't like me.
Right. Totally.
True.
Yeah. And I've had a lot of fun coaching in this space, because when you really open up that script of this person is rejecting me, what you find is most people who feel rejected a lot also reject people a lot. And they do what I call preemptive rejection. I think you're going to reject me, so just in case that happens, I'll reject you. I'm not interested in you anyway. He's a bit of a douchebag. I don't really like him. He has low standards. He's probably not going anywhere in his career. So there's this very like subtle maneuvering that we do to avoid feeling rejection. But if you want to not feel so rejected by other people, look at how much you reject yourself and how much you reject other people. Start at home. If you clear that stuff up, you'll be 80% of the way to not being too worried when people reject you.
It's so true. I feel like we should do a whole nother lecture. Yeah, like it totally. Yeah. I always tell clients, like, catch yourself when you're judging a man, because you're kind of just showing yourself how you're always judging yourself. So you read my mind about the positive emotion. That was going to be the next thing. Start with the positive emotion. And I love everything you said about embracing your unpleasant feelings too. I mean, that is like just the hallmark of all of my work, right? Like for what I've been going through, it's like, I'm like loving this place where I'm at right now. I'm totally embracing it. I'm not resisting it, because it's like I'm getting all the benefits from it. Like I'm actually really creative when I'm feeling a little bit depressed. I'm not seeing it as a bad thing. I'm saying this is how it is right now. It's not going to be forever. And I can love it and accept where I am. And it's totally the way to go, you guys. Like,
I love that. Yeah. If people want the fancy way of saying that is non-hierarchical view. And it basically means you stop seeing all your experiences in a hierarchy. This is a great experience. This is a bad experience. This is better. This is worse. And you just say it's all experience. Can you be with it? Can you be intimate with it? Whether it's depressive sadness or euphoric joy, can you be with it? Can you experience it and be intimate with it?
Because if you're cut off from one, I kind of think if you're cut off from one emotion, you're cut off from them all, right? So,
totally, yeah.
Wow. Okay, I keep getting lost in what you're saying. There's so many people watching live. Oh my gosh. You are both fantastic, by the way. So professional, wise, but warm. Always enjoy seeing both of you. Thank you so much. Love your work. Oh, you guys are so sweet. Thank you for the inspiration. Make sure you post more. I've been posting like every day, I think. I'll try and maybe every other day. I'll try and start posting every day. I'll do what I can. That's so true. I feel like I'm stepping up when I'm my full self. A guy pulls away when I feel impressed by him and I start focusing on him. Someone else said, I love that. I always lose myself in relationships because I suppress my emotions. Amazing. What if a guy is emotionally distant or not comfortable with showing emotion because he grew up in an environment where he didn't do that often? How would you invite him to be open, be vulnerable, if he is not used to showing his vulnerable side? What a great question, Diane. Wow, really common situation, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. My initial answer to that would be, again, to start with yourself. Like the kind of model it, right? The more you're in that territory, the more you can offer that sort of invitation to him. And maybe there's a question you can ask a guy like, I want to know you more deeply, and I'm wondering if you want that. Like, do you want me to know you in these places? Like, I want that. So it's an invitation. It's not a demand. It's not a push. It's actually an inviting out, and sometimes there are specific things that help this, like if you go on like a romantic weekend, or for some people it's like getting drunk together, or just something that kind of drops that veil a little bit and allows people to open up. Anything that can get a man more connected to his heart and his body. Again, gross orienting generalization, but a lot of us as dudes spend a lot of time up here, right, in our heads. So anything that can invite us more into our bodies and our heart center and our body is generally good. So that might be taking a bath, going to hot springs, even just going for a walk, massage, tango, anything that kind of allows you to start to get out of your head, because the head is normally the thing that stops people being vulnerable because they're overthinking it, right? Or they're kind of lost upstairs. Vulnerability is a heart center quality. So anything that can invite a guy to drop out of his head, and again, ultimately, I mean, if you really love this guy and you want to be with him, that's what you want. And if there's a part of you that doesn't feel like you can really be met there, you might actually lay that out, not as an ultimatum, but as this is a really important thing for me in a relationship. And I'm not sure if it's possible with you. I want it to be, and I want to know if you're up for exploring that with me. Right. So then you kind of really put it on the table as like, hey, is there a way that we as a team could orient towards this? I wouldn't settle long term for being with someone that you don't think can at least somewhat meet you emotionally, because it's just such important territory, But sometimes we need a bit of a kick up the butt or a bit of an invitation. Sometimes as guys, we might not even know. We might think we're doing it, but actually we're not. We need to kind of experience it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Love everything you said. I'm like trying to listen to you and scroll through.
Yeah,
I cannot wait to go back and like rewind that part like 5 times, because that was really powerful. That was really good. Fiona says, I'm surprised. I was surprised when me sharing my vulnerability drew men closer to me.
Yes.
Like being guarded. It was the opposite that really creates love and connection. Oh my gosh. I can totally.
That's beautiful.
That. Yeah. I mean, I was like the most shut down. Like if I can do this, anybody can. So it's so great. You guys, these questions are I can't even read them out loud because I'm going to start crying because they're so sweet. I just have the best audience in the entire world. Lots of people asking about like reaching back out. Let's see. Patricia has a question. When you take a step to reconnect with a man after 2 months, is that a form of vulnerability? And someone else was asking, I can't find it now, but her ex or someone hasn't talked to her in like 10 days and she doesn't know what to do, is there a way to reach out? And when you're trying to reconnect, is there a way to do it in like a vulnerable way? I'd love to hear all your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's so common. So I actually do think that's mostly an act of vulnerability. If you say something like, hey, I notice I find myself thinking about you and about our connection, and I still feel really open to our connection. Something like that, which it kind of, again, is over here with you, right? It's like, this is what I'm experiencing. And you're sort of giving him a green light, right? Like if he then wants to connect with you. Sometimes there's a challenge for women that kind of want the guy to be initiating and taking the lead in the kind of dating and relating side of things, that you've got to learn how to give a green light, which is like, hey, I'm inviting you to get to know me more if you would like that, or I'm interested in you, or I would love to reconnect. And to do that, you've actually got to be able to hear a yes or a no. And that's what makes that hard. But it ultimately is good information, you know? And all I would say is if that's happening sort of ongoingly, that you're the one that's kind of having to reach out to do the reconnection, that's also really good data, you know? Because, you know, I like to sort of sometimes bust my clients on this. I'm like, look, if a guy really wants to get to know you, like, he can do that. You know, he can step up and take the initiative and do that. So if he's not, that's useful information. It might mean that he's not available for that with you. It might be that he's not available for that in this cycle. And I'm quite a fan of people trying to be as transparent as they can and actually asking a guy relatively early, getting to know him, like, what are you available for? You know, you don't have to make any promises to me, but let me understand you before I try and get attached to you. Let me understand like where you're at, what you're available for, what you want. And, you know, sometimes it's even hard to know that as a guy, right? But at least opening up the question can get you a bit closer to the answer. But data are important. If you always have to do the reconnection, I wouldn't stand for that long term. But if you're giving a guy a green light that he didn't know he had a green light, that's useful to do. You know?
Oh, that's a really good distinction. Wow. Yeah, really good. I love what you said too, like just starting right off and you think it's okay. And I agree with you, just to ask like from the beginning and being really open about what you want and curious about what the guy's looking for right away. Did I hear that right?
Yeah. I mean, you know, whether that's like the first date, but I'm saying, you know, in the first weeks and dates of getting to know him, and is to try and listen as objectively as possible, right? Which is difficult. If you're starting to subjectively feel like you like this guy, that's difficult. But it's so much, you know, I've even had this in the past where women have said to me like, wow, I really wished I'd heard you, because you did actually tell me up front that you weren't really available for something, but it's easy to kind of miss it. So, yeah, you know, and I think as men, we can do a way better job of that. And I actually think there are stages of masculine development that most men aren't even really aware of, where they're not actually available for a relationship, even if they're good kind of long-term eventual marriage material. But in this cycle, they're actually not looking for a partner. They're looking for a lover at best, or even sometimes just a companion, right? They want a connection, but they don't really want to have any commitment or obligation. And you need to be able to distinguish that from a guy that can kind of like never commit, from a guy who like, oh, in this cycle, he's not available for that. So let me not try and make him something that he's not. That's why I'm a fan of these conversations, because the more mutual transparency, the less people get hurt, and the more you can actually invest in something that's investable. And deep down, a lot of guys, if they didn't think they would upset you or that it would prevent them getting to know you, they actually know when they're not investable. But they're not used to acknowledging that to themselves and other people. Because if you think of yourself as like, oh, I'm a good guy, like I would be a good catch for a woman, but actually right now I got to get my shit together and I'm not really available for that, you know, or I'm just coming out of a really heavy relationship or serious or long-term or marriage or whatever, like that's probably not the guy that you want to go partner. And oftentimes there's a pattern, right, where women go after the emotionally unavailable men because it reproduces something that feels familiar. So,
oh gosh, and I'm like laughing over here because what you're saying is so true. Men are pretty straightforward usually. Like they'll tell you right where they're at. Like most men. I mean, it's such a tiny percentage of men that'll say they're looking for something serious when they're really not. I mean, most men I found are straightforward. We don't want to hear that sometimes, right? Especially if we, like I said, you're all caught up in your feelings for him, right? Or like the chemistry is like taking you over. Yes. Men will pretty much tell you at the beginning, if I'm not really looking for anything serious, I'm not available for that. And it's our job, I feel like the job of your own masculine energy, in my opinion, to not put yourself in a situation where if a guy makes a decision, you're going to be completely devastated, right? Like They tell us right away, you have to hear that and just go, no, it doesn't. And it doesn't matter how much you like him. It doesn't matter how great you think you'd be together. You have to put yourself first, because we don't, oh my gosh.
I think that's right. Yeah. I think if you can ask the right questions, then pay attention to data, right? So actually look, like, is he reaching out? Does he initiate dates? Is he consistent? Like, is he kind of showing up in a way that would imagine he'd actually be good partner material? And then there's also your intuition, which you can't overlook that. Like, if I've seen situations a lot where, a woman's girlfriends are saying, I don't think this guy's good for you. And they're like kind of defending him. It's like, if you have to defend him against your girlfriends, that's probably at least a red flag that you might want to look at. Maybe they don't see him and you do see him, but maybe there's also something that your own heart is kind of your own emotional reactivity, in a sense, is stopping you from seeing what is actually happening in front of you.
Oh my gosh.
So it's hard, but it's like, yeah, and if you were avoiding having that conversation, if having the conversation about where we're going or what's he available for feels like it's too difficult, that in itself is data, because it probably means a part of you doesn't want to have that conversation because the sober truth might hurt you. So you're kind of avoiding it. And anytime that happens, again, I've been there. I'm not saying any of this is easy. It's just worthwhile if you can do it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I would love to do a whole video just on that. Yeah. Because there's so much I have to say on that. I actually polled my audience like a couple of months ago, I think. And the question was, have you ever, did your intuition ever tell you that something was off at the beginning and you ignored it? You ignored red flags, but you found out later that your intuition was right all along. And I think like 98% of people said yes.
Wow.
And only 2% said no. So I was just curious about that. I asked a lot of questions about intuition.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a great gift. If the culture at large doesn't really have much time and attention on intuition, but I think it's coming more and more, and it's such a gift, and it's not like your intuition is the only way to discern the truth, but it's such an important piece of it. It's like head, heart, and body. And if you can get all of those talking to each other, then you have so much better information at your disposal to make the right decisions for you.
Totally. And then it's just like the most obvious choice in the world. We're just like, no, I don't have time for that. I don't care how much I like you. That there is no way on this earth that I am going to make myself available to that kind of situation.
Right.
Like, it's so important to do that. It's important to do it quickly, And I think the other, like, kind of the positive side of being vulnerable and opening up kind of right away in baby steps, obviously, it's not like you have to tell a guy all your like deepest fears and insecurities on the first date or anything, but just being vulnerable.
If that happens, often it's actually not vulnerability. It's like a pre-prepared script that they just sort of go in and go blah, 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 blah.
Totally.
So self-disclosure before there's enough container isn't really intimacy. It's actually inappropriate intimacy. Totally. Right? If I just meet you in the street and I'm like, oh, let me tell you about the grief I have over my granddad, that's not really appropriate. Like, we don't really know each other. We don't really have a trusted. So sometimes women get confused by this because they're like, well, in the first date, I told him everything. And I'm like, that's inappropriate disclosure. That's not really intimacy. It's actually too much. You're not calibrated. You're not attuned. Intimacy is about being in your heart so you can be sensitive and attuned to what's in front of you.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, think about, for everyone watching, think about if a guy like right away shares something, it's like, it's like your first conversation with him. It's just like that energy is a little bit, you get repelled by that, right? Another thing is, I just think there's such a shortage of intimacy these days. Like, you go out and everyone's like on their phone and it's like, so if you can learn to create intimacy like right away, just in these little tiny moments in baby steps, like in very low risk situations, talking about how you feel about, like you said earlier, your work day or your plans for the weekend or the weather or something, like you can just create intimacy like right away. And then while being in tune with your intuition, it's just totally the way to go, I think.
Right.
So I love everything you said. So good. Okay. Let me check. I keep ignoring the chat because I'm so into what you're saying right now. Nicole says, you're so smart. You two are so amazing. Oh, you guys are so sweet. Oh my gosh. I love what Jack is sharing. I just subscribed to his channel. Valuable info and insight. Yeah. Oh my gosh. You guys are going to love all his videos. Very cool way to think about it. More videos with Adrian and Anya. This is so great. Adrian, I'm going to do videos with Adrian right after this. And Anya's coming over tomorrow. We're doing a live stream, I think. So thanks to your videos, I've learned to be vulnerable and being in touch with my feminine energy. I see obvious positive changes in my boyfriend. And I'm curious, what signs can you see when he's decided to commit to marriage? Anything you have to say on that, Jack?
The signs that a guy's, well, I mean, eventually, obviously, he asked the question. So one way of thinking about this is, how much of a future conversation you guys are having, right? How far into the future are you able to talk about plans? How willing is he to, have a conversation about kind of where the relationship's going? It's a fine balance, right? So there's a fine balance between wanting to know where a guy's heart is at, but not sort of pushing it prematurely. I think a lot of guys, when it comes to the bigger questions of commitment, there may be a way that they want to kind of think and internalize and get reflection and kind of deal with their doubts. And sometimes, not always, the trajectory that I often see in relationship is that maybe the guy is into it earlier, quicker, and the woman after a while kind of opens to him, and then she's into it, and then she gets to a place earlier that she's like, I would totally marry this guy, and it takes him a little bit longer to get to that same place. So it's also just to honor that there are different sort of cycles, and I think sometimes the masculine takes a little longer to get to that sort of commitment, because the old understanding of commitment is like, I kind of lose my freedom. I think the new integrated understanding of commitment is that through my commitments, I have my freedom. But that takes a kind of maturity sometimes to be with that. I know certainly when I was looking at questions of commitment in my 20s, I was not there, and I was not ready to really understand that you get freedom through commitment. So yeah, what else would I look for? How much does he include your family? I'd look for how many domains of his life he includes you in, right? So do you know him in his home life? Do you know him in his work life? Do you know him in his friendship life, in his, romance, travel? That's also a bit of a flag, right? On the other side, if you're thinking seriously about a guy, but he only puts you in one domain of his life, you only have one style of date, right? You only have Netflix dates, or you only have restaurant dinner dates. You don't really get to see the fullness of his life. That's also he may not be thinking of you in that more committed way. Certainly if you've known him for several months.
I love it. I'm just looking up. There's a similar question from Gloria. My guy is afraid of commitment. We've been dating for almost 3 months. He texts me and plans things to do together. We communicate well. I've been vulnerable and open to him several times. He appreciates it a lot, but he's guarding his heart because he had a bad experience when he was married. Do you think he would be ready for commitment one day? Hard to tell without really knowing much about him.
But all I'll say is that, generally speaking, even if you've had a bad experience of marriage, guys that are oriented to getting married quite often get married again, because they're sort of wired that they're actually looking for a monogamous long-term partnership. That's sort of in their nature. So I would actually say that's generally a good kind of indication. I would also say 3 months is pretty early, So there's something about commitment. It's like, you shouldn't wait too long, but you definitely shouldn't do it too prematurely, I think. Of course, there are these exceptions of people who are like, oh, we met each other and in 10 days we got married. But that's the unicorn. For most people, we say at least 4 seasons, right? Know someone through 4 seasons to really get to know who's in front of you. Know them in winter when it's perhaps like long nights. Know them when they're stressed with work. Know them when they're not stressed with work. Know them so that you get to sort of see more information. So if I'd been with someone for 3 months, I don't think I'd be too worried about commitment. I would be looking at, what's the quality of our intimacy? What's the quality of our connection? Is he providing a direction to the relationship? Just because he doesn't ultimately want to marry you, is he kind of in that level of he's leading the relationship, right? That he's got a vision for the relationship, or he's got a vision for what this could be, or he's in his masculine in terms of initiating or wanting to see you or taking you on weekends or, that kind of stuff. I think that's a better place at 3 months to be looking at than does he want to put a ring on your finger? Because, that might just be premature right now, and ultimately most women want to be chosen, right? Again, gross generalization, but most women would love a guy that they want to be with long-term to actually propose to them. And you start to deny that opportunity if you get there too fast, and then you're sort of inwardly kind of having that demand on him. There's something really cool about that being organic. And if it never comes, that's also a tough answer for you, but at least you kind of know. Whereas if you have to start knocking on his door too much, it's like you've already kind of lost the thing that you want.
So true. Yeah, if you're like at a place where you're trying to get a guy to commit, you've already lost that whole game. Not that it's a game, but I like what you said about focusing on the connection is what I would say about that, not the commitment itself. At that point, especially, because a lot of women I see are kind of like starving the connection or ignoring it because they're so focused on getting that commitment. I mean, obviously, if you really, really want to get married or, you know, settle down and have a family, and he's clearly told you it's never going to happen, you want to listen to that, right? Like we talked about, men will tell you, they're pretty good at being straightforward and telling you. It's just, you know, are we hearing them or are we ignoring that because we don't really want to hear them, right?
Yeah. So, and you know, from my own experience, marriage is kind of scary in some ways to guys. You know, it's like it can. The fact that they want to take that seriously is also a good sign. Here's what I would say: you can have a conversation about where you're at. It would be great to get some of that conversation. If you know someone's been hurt in the past in their experience, in this instance in marriage, at some point you kind of want to have a conversation about that, so you can start to form intimacy around that together. So that you're actually getting each other's world. Like he gets some of your maybe fears and insecurities and you get some of his. So I would say before you get too worried about the actual, is he going to want to marry you? What is that conversation about? How does he want to not bring his bad experience into his future? Like what does he want to let go of? Or what are his fears related to that? Or how could you have specific ways of talking to one another where if one of those fears is starting to get activated, he could presence that to you and say, oh, wow, I noticed this thing that happened in the past is starting to come in here and I actually don't want it to, but I want to be revealed to you. So again, that's sort of like the intimacy about what's really going on.
Yes. Yeah. Gloria said, thank you so much. Yeah. So that was very helpful. Someone else asked, how do I know if a guy is lying about wanting to marry me? What would make you think he was lying, I guess would be my question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the essence of that probably for me is you're asking about trust. And again, in the same way that I'm talking about the 80-20 of keeping 80% of the attention on yourself, a lot of trust has to do with, do you actually trust yourself, right? So part of trusting yourself is that if there are red flags, if there are warning signs, if you have an intuition that something isn't kind of right, that you actually listen to it. So often I've seen women, they get hurt and they've had these intuitions that they've ignored. So they're not really trusting themselves. So, you know, obviously not all men are equally trustworthy for sure, but sort out the part of your side of the fence where you're actually listening and you're getting in touch with your intuition. And what that means is you're getting out of your head, because most of your doubt and fear comes from your head, and you've got to drop your awareness down into your body and get in touch with your knowing, your intuition, your higher self, that sort of stuff. You know, and ultimately look at a guy's action. Look at how much he's trusted by other men, right? If a man is really trusted a lot by other men, that's a good indication. How much does he do what he says he's going to do? Like, you know, trust. I think trust needs to be earned with women. I don't believe that a guy just off the bat should have your trust. I think it's okay for guys to earn it by showing up and doing what they say they're going to do and being good with your heart and all the things that would allow you to trust them more, you know? And part of that is learning, and I've had to learn this the hard way myself, is learning where you're violating someone's trust and you may not even be realizing it, you know? So
I love it. Yeah, something I always say, I know this is kind of a strong statement, but I'm sort of a big fan of strong statements. It's like you don't really ever have to worry about trusting a man as long as you trust yourself and your own feelings, your own intuitions, your own boundaries, right? Where you can, even if what a guy's saying doesn't really make sense, it's kind of confusing, you can feel like, no, this is not a good situation for me. It's just not a good situation. And so, how do you build trust with yourself? It's like, well, just like Jack said, how do you build trust with a man is when he follows through on what he says he's going to do, right? Like if he says he's going to call, he calls, right? He says he's going to pick you up at 8 o'clock and he doesn't flake on you. And so start doing that with yourself. Start keeping those commitments you make to yourself so you can start to trust yourself more, right? If you set a boundary with a guy, stick to it. Don't collapse your boundaries just because you really like this one guy, right? It's one example, but I love that. Yeah, trusting yourself. Then it's like, you know, it's just such a great, your intuition kicks in. You can really feel like, this is good. I can keep standing right here. Or like, no, this does not feel good. I need to take a step back. But you want to stay open in that process.
Yes.
In my opinion, I'd love to hear. Yeah. So what I really found, and this is being vulnerable, is like what we tend to want to do is we go, okay, this situation feels safe to me. I'm going to open myself up here. And I don't like this situation. I'm going to shut myself down here. So we're always like opening up and shutting down. Like we're opening and closing constantly. I think women do. I don't know.
It's the nature of the feminine, yeah. Open and close. Yeah.
Like a camera shutter, like we're opening and closing.
Right.
So like what I encourage my clients to do is stay open 100% of the time. And that's how you build that intuition and that trust in yourself. Because then you can always take a step back. If something doesn't feel good, you'll feel it right away and you can take a step back. But you want to stay open in that process. You don't want to like shut yourself down. And then you're cut off from this like amazing superpower we have as women. Yeah, totally. I love it. Oh my gosh, I love everything you're saying. Let's see, I think we might have gotten to everyone's question. So helpful information. Thank you. I feel good about our connection and intimacy. We enjoy our time together. I try to be there for him and it's mutual. As Gloria with the guy who had a bad marriage before. When a guy says in the beginning of the relationship that he doesn't want to remarry because of previous bad marriage, is that something he can change his mind when he said your relationship is better than any relationship he's ever been in? Oh, related question from Angela. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, that is a great question. Again, I would encourage setting up the space to have a real conversation about that. Like that you really dimensionalize that conversation to understand what does marriage mean to him? Is there some distinction that he's making between marriage and a kind of committed partnership? Like, is there some kind of committed partnership that would actually feel good to you that isn't marriage, right? That so you start to, because marriage is this, I remember this even in my 20s, you say, is marriage even a natural institution? There's so many things that get projected on it. Like we have the opportunity to be self-authoring in marriage now, where we can actually author the script and say, well, this is what our marriage is going to be about. And I would try and get down to that, to the values and the meaning that's ascribed there, to see, do you have a place where you might be able to meet each other, and for him to really understand what's important to you about marriage, right? For some women, it's like, actually, if the guy wants to be a dad with them, that's actually way more important to them than specifically being married, because that's like the investment that they want. So, I would open up the script. It's tricky, yeah, because in any of these places where people have been hurt and therefore have created a rule that normally that's a way of staying safe, right? It's normally a way of saying, I don't want to get, once bitten, twice shy. I don't want to get bitten again. And it may be that in the right sort of vulnerability mutually, you can actually open that up, and maybe there's some stuff that he needs to release. I would also potentially get professional support around that. Get some reflection, get a coach or a therapist that you can work with.
Yeah, great. That was amazing. Yeah, I don't have anything to add there. That was so great. I think we might have gotten to everyone's question for the most part, and we're coming up to the end of the hour. Let's see. Thank you both for being Earth Angels. Your work is greatly valued and appreciated. Thank you so much. I cannot wait for you to read all of these amazing comments. I think we got to everyone's. Megan, oh, you're so sweet, Megan. Thank you. No, I just use it's just like a sunscreen it's like a Neutrogena sunscreen. People ask me that all the time, and I don't have any. I wish I had some kind of crazy secret, but I just use a lot of sunscreen, a lot of like gentle skin cleanser, just like the Target brand. It's $10. It's really when would be a good time to talk to your ex that you'd like to try to rekindle the relationship down the road when he's ready for a commitment? Anything you have to say there? When would be a good time to talk to your ex?
So I'm going to maybe suggest something different, which is to actually potentially consider to let the connection go, and to trust that if something is meant to happen with this guy, that he will actually come back into your field and initiate it. And that can be really difficult if you're, it's kind of attached and that you feel like you love him and he's the guy. But I think it's much cleaner to do it that way, to kind of basically say, I let this go, even just in its current form, and I'm going to kind of move on in my life, and I'm going to focus on my own life, or I might even date, whatever, and kind of trust that if this is really meant to be, that there's a strong enough connection that he will reinitiate. You could say to him, look, I'm still open to us, but I actually want you as my partner. And if you're not available for that, I need to move on. Currently, you're not available for that. So I'm actually going to move on. My door is still open to you if you want to reach out. And at any such time, I will reconsider that. Now, some women find it easier to do it that way and say, hey, my door's open. Some people find that's hard to live with that sort of uncertainty. So I say it's better to close it and trust that if a guy really wants to be with you, he might have to be a man. He might have to fight to win you back, right? If he's not been willing to be it first time, all right, his loss in some ways. You shouldn't have to kind of just wait for crumbs or for him to be ready. So that's the piece. Because I've had a lot of people there kind of wait, and ultimately they're then disappointed, and boom, he goes and like marries someone else, and they don't even see it coming. So I'm not trying to scaremonger there. Just that if he's not ready in this cycle, I think it's better to let it go, because then if it does reform, it's stronger, rather than it being sort of like we've got this kind of little bit of a thread that's kind of connecting us. And I would say to women, men aren't really fragile, most of them, and the relationship that lasts can't be fragile. Right, you're going to go through some crap together. If you've ever been married or been in a long-term relationship, there's a lot of stuff that you have to handle. So if your relationship is kind of fragile, that you never quite know if the guy's going to show up or not, it probably ain't going to work. So there's also something about taking that step back and seeing, is this going to come back with enough of a yes from him and enough robustness that you can actually be in the fire together. And there are plenty of men who've woken up, and it even works for women as well, where you say, look, there's a boundary. I would love to be with you. I love you, but I'm only available for the real enchilada. It kind of wakes people up, because they actually get to a decision point. Like, do I really think you're my woman? In which case I might want to step in and claim you. Or if I'm not, I'm actually going to let you go. And that might be really hard for you and me, but that's in service of loving you. Because a guy at one level, if he really loves you, he's got to see that if he won't be committed in the long term, he's got to let you go. Because there's nothing fair about keeping women in your orbit when you're not going to be with them.
Oh my gosh. I agree 1,000%. I want to take that last 2 minutes and like publish it as its own video on my channel, because that is so important. Yes, move on. Get him out of your energy. Start dating like right now, right? Not to like go through the motions to strategically make him jealous or get him back. But yeah, and of course not knowing really the details about your situation. That's the best thing you can do. Anyone in that situation, just watch that part over and over. Like, that was gold, and I could not agree with you more. That was amazing. Oh my gosh, amazing. Melanie wants to know how to get help from you one-on-one. Are you doing private coaching right now, Jack?
I do private coaching. I am actually I'm full at the moment, but I'm accepting applications. If you just go to my website, so jackbutler.com, jackbutler.com, you'll see you can apply for coaching there. And then I'll reach out to you when I open up cycles, which probably won't be not too far in the future.
Awesome. I can include that if you want to in the description. I don't think it's there right now. Okay, last question, because it's totally related to this topic, and then I know we're a little over on time.
I'm fine. I'm loving it. I'll go. If people have questions, I'm in.
Awesome. So LJ asks, I'm in a long distance relationship. Is it okay to have these vulnerability chats over the phone? Someone else earlier was asking about texting too. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on vulnerability over the phone versus texting. Obviously, if you're in a long distance relationship, a lot of conversations are going to happen over the phone, right? Yeah,
I'm definitely a fan of real timeness, right? So I do think there's wherever possible, if you can't meet in person, talk over video or the phone rather than doing this stuff in text. I'm also quite a fan of both people coming to these conversations knowing that that's what's going to happen, even if it's a little scary, like, oh, we're going to talk, but there's something about knowing, okay, we're sort of both showing up with a good energy and a good intention. I'm not a huge fan of ongoingly long distance relationships. That's just a personal thing. I found that really difficult. And I worked really hard to make sure with my partner that I kind of pursued around the world, basically, to make sure that we were in person together so that we could have that foundation. So I'm curious in that instance as to, is there a vulnerability to have a conversation to say, hey, I can do long distance with you for a certain amount of time, but I want to have a sense of, are we trying to do that in service of then building a life somewhere together, or at least we're open to that possibility? Because I think if that possibility isn't anywhere soon, it can sometimes be a really hard path. And I've definitely coached a lot of people who have sort of had these pseudo kind of long distance connections that haven't really, doesn't really mean they have the presence of a man in their life in the way that they want, put it that way.
Totally agree. Oh gosh, I get so many questions about long distance relationships. One of the number one topics I get asked about. I would love to have you. If that was something if that was your experience, I'd love to have you back on it, because I get so many questions about that. Okay, I think let's see. I think we're good. I think we got to everyone else's. Let's talk about your free gift. It's in the description right now. This video is also in the comment section. Yeah, I'd love to hear about that.
Okay, so this is a free webinar. It's with my good friend and teaching partner, Clayton Olson, who's a relationship coach here in Colorado. And it's called The 3 Keys to Being Relationship Ready, How to Attract and Keep a High Quality Man. And the essence of it really is how to be loved for who you really are. So the webinar is very much oriented to how to not play games, how to be your true self, how to know when you're being your true self. We distinguish 2 unconscious roles, the discarded and the defender. That portion alone, we get so much feedback that women like find it very powerful and a kind of waking up process. And it's completely free. You can just click on the link, find a time that works for you. We also have, one of the keys is about understanding the male mind and understanding what we call the single organizing question that a guy is asking, from meeting you, dating you, right the way through to ultimately making a commitment to you. So if you want to get inside the guy's world a little bit more, how we think and know from our experience of being men and working with hundreds of men, then you're going to want to see this webinar.
Oh my gosh, yeah, for sure. I put it in the description. I think it's the first link. So everyone, please go check that out. I can include a link to your website or private coaching application too, if you want. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, thanks for staying over time, Jack. If we missed any of your guys' questions, post them in the comment section after this post, and maybe we can go through and answer some of them. And if you have time at some point. Yeah. Okay. This was amazing, Jack.
I love being here. Thank you.
Okay, good. Yes, thank you for kind of carrying that. I know my brain's like not working properly today. I was telling her right before we started, I was like, I want to be on my game today, but it's, lately it's just been,
I think you've been on your game. If this is you not on your game, then okay, the world would have.
Be totally not on my game, but this was like the highlight of my day. So much fun. I would love to have you back and talk about, my God, so many things, long distance relationships, all that stuff you said about the ex and moving on. Like there's like 50 topics that popped into my head during this during this. Okay, amazing. Any last words of wisdom or tips or anything else you'd like to share before we close out on this topic of vulnerability?
One of the things I really care about is people being themselves and people being loved for who they are and people being on a path of growth and development. And I'm just such a fan of relationship as the quickest path for most of us to wake up to our defenses, our wounds, our unconscious strategies, our unconscious roles, just kind of all the stuff that we do that stops us from really just relaxing into who we are. So I kind of want to end just really with a pitch that, relationship will undoubtedly be difficult and have times of pain and struggle and confusion. That's part of it. But it's such a powerful place to be in the world from. And I think it's kind of the new frontier. I talk a lot about the new relationship, which is where we're both on a path of growth together, where we're both trying to become more aware and more conscious. And we're actually, rather than it being like, oh, he triggers me, that's a problem. It's like, oh, he triggers me. He's the one that's going to wake me up. Right. So it's a completely different orientation to wanting the difficult stuff, because that's actually, it's like an oyster, where the grit is that creates the oyster. It's like relationship can really be that for you. So if you haven't found that in your life yet, if you're still working out who the right guy for you is, just keep at it. Like, all the power to you. You're on the path, and that's all it's about.
So good. So everything you say, I can't wait to rewatch this and just soak in all your words of wisdom. This was amazing. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for showing up. I might do another live stream tomorrow, hopefully with my friend Anya Grace, if she ends up stopping by that. So if you guys are free tomorrow afternoon, we might be doing that. And thank you so much for all your amazing comments, Jack. I can't wait for you to read them. They're so good.
Thanks, guys.
If we missed your questions, post them in the comment section. There are some last ones that came through at the very end. Just copy and paste them down below in the comments, and we'll try and get to them. Please check out Jack's free webinar. Oh my gosh, he obviously has so much wisdom to share. And I always learn a lot from if I watch a video of yours or anything. So I'm super excited to have you back if you'd like.
I would love it.
Okay.
Make it happen. Awesome. And thanks for everyone for your questions. I've really enjoyed them. This has been some really stimulating questions. I love nothing more than questions that you can really kind of get into. So thanks, and thank you for having me.
Yes. Okay, so thank you so much again. Have a great weekend, everyone, and I will talk to you soon, Jack. Thank you. This was amazing.
Yeah. Namaste.